Please, close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the sweet, intoxicating scent of night jasmine wafting through your open bedroom window on a warm summer evening. Can you hear the distant, comforting sound of a neighborhood dog barking, or the rhythmic clicking of a grandmother's worry beads? Welcome back to your youth. Today, we are going on a deeply emotional journey to rediscover 20 magical memories from growing up in Greece during the 1970s and 1980s. We are going to dust off the cherished corners of our minds and bring back the sights, the sounds, and the profound feelings of a time that shaped who we are today. By the end of this video, when we talk about those innocent evening strolls under the fading sun, I promise you will feel a warm tear of beautiful nostalgia. So, sit back, relax, and let us remember together. Life back then moved at an entirely different pace. Time was not something we constantly chased. It was something we lived. Days felt longer, stretching out beautifully, without the frantic rush of modern technology. We possessed the beautiful art of waiting. We waited patiently for our favorite song to play on the radio. We waited for a handwritten letter to arrive in the mail. And we waited all week for the joyous Sunday family dinner. There is a common myth today that because we lived without smartphones and instant messaging, our lives were somehow poorer or disconnected. But you and I know the absolute truth. The reality is that our lives were infinitely richer in genuine human connection. We did not need a screen to know how our friends were doing. We just walked to the neighborhood square and found them playing in the dust. We looked each other in the eyes. We shared our food, our joys, and our sorrows across the open balconies. We were deeply, truly connected, wrapped in a community that felt like one massive, extended family. Do you remember the unmistakable sound of that little bell ringing down the street on a blistering hot summer afternoon? Before the modern supermarkets took over, the ice cream man with his three-wheeled cart was the absolute hero of our childhood in the 1970s. As soon as that ringing echoed between the concrete apartment buildings, a wave of pure excitement washed over the neighborhood. We would drop our toys, scramble for the few drachmas our mothers had given us, and run barefoot on the hot asphalt. The cart was a magical chest of frozen wonders. The smell of the melting ice cream, the condensation on the glass lid, the bright logos, they all formed the ultimate summer memory. You would stand on your tiptoes, trying to see the colourful wrappers inside, debating whether to get the classic rocket lolly or a simple vanilla cone. And the taste? Oh, the taste was something extraordinary. It was not just frozen milk and sugar. It tasted like pure, unadulterated freedom, like a long summer day with no homework and no worries. Sharing those treats with your friends, sitting on the sidewalk with sticky fingers, trying to eat it fast before the bright Greek sun melted it away. Those moments taught us that the greatest joys in life could be bought with just a few coins and enjoyed in the company of our best friends. Now let us remember the enchanting evenings spent at the open-air summer cinemas. Walking in, you immediately felt the crunch of the white gravel under your shoes. You would take your seat on one of those classic canvas folding chairs, feeling the gentle evening breeze against your skin. The air was always heavy with the sweet, romantic smell of blooming honeysuckle and jasmine that climbed the white walls around the screen. Before the movie started, you would hear the rustling of paper cones as people bought roasted pumpkin seeds to snack on. The salty taste on your lips as you cracked the seeds open is a flavor you can never quite forget. Then, the projector would start clicking, casting a magical beam of light through the dark night sky, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. When the intermission came, there was a joyous rush to the small canteen for a cold glass bottle of orangeade. You watched the film under a canopy of bright stars, with the gentle sound of crickets mixing perfectly with the actors' voices. This was not just watching a movie in a dark room, it was a shared communal dream where the whole neighborhood laughed, gasped, and cried together beneath the beautiful Greek night sky. Let us walk down memory lane to Sunday mornings and the unforgettable ritual of the neighborhood bakery. Do you remember the heavy round tin pan filled with tender lamb and potatoes, soaking in olive oil, fresh lemon juice, and wild oregano? We did not always cook this grand meal in our own small kitchens. Instead, it was often a child's proud duty to carefully carry this precious cargo down the street to the local baker. The baker, a kind man whose clothes and eyebrows were perpetually dusted with white flour, would slide your family's lunch deep into his massive wood-fired oven. The savory aroma that wafted down the street a few hours later was absolutely intoxicating. It was a rich, comforting smell that announced to everyone it was a day of rest and family. Picking the food up at noon was a delicate and serious operation. The pan was scorching hot, heavily wrapped in thick newspaper or old kitchen towels. You walked back home taking tiny, careful steps, praying not to spill a single drop of that golden, lemon-infused oil. The baker knew every single family by their first name, making the entire neighborhood feel incredibly close and connected. Let our minds wander to the empty dirt lots, those magical spaces we called our ultimate playgrounds. Long before children were confined to indoor play areas and organized sports, we had these beautifully wild, untamed patches of earth right in the middle of our neighborhoods. You would spend entire days there, coming home with scraped knees covered in dust, which you proudly wore like medals of honor. We used 2 heavy stones to mark the goalposts for an endless, passionate game of football with a cheap plastic ball. We dug small holes in the dirt to play intense, strategic games of glass marbles, trading our most prized, colourful spheres with our friends. The dust would stick to our sweaty faces, but we did not care in the slightest. There were no referees, no hovering parents, just the unwritten rules of childhood and pure, unbridled imagination. We only knew it was time to finally go home when the streetlights started flickering on, casting long shadows across the dirt, and we heard our mothers calling our names loudly from the open apartment balconies. It was a rugged, wild, and incredibly happy way to grow up. Do you recall the rich, rhythmic calls of the travelling tradesmen echoing through the morning streets? The neighbourhood was alive with a daily parade of passing salesmen, bringing everything we needed right to our doorsteps. First came the ice seller, lugging massive, freezing blocks of ice on his shoulder with metal tongs, essential for keeping our food fresh in the old wooden ice boxes before electric refrigerators became common. Then you would hear the melodic voice of the greengrocer on his 3-wheeled motorcycle, calling out the prices of sweet red watermelons and juicy summer tomatoes. He would weigh the vegetables on an old brass scale right there on the street. There was the chair caner, sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk, expertly weaving fresh straw into the seats of old wooden chairs. And of course, the knife sharpener, whose grinding wheel sent beautiful showers of bright orange sparks into the air, mesmerizing all the children who gathered around to watch. These men were not just selling goods or services. They were the familiar, friendly voices of our daily routine, weaving a tight fabric of trust and community throughout the neighborhood. Now let us remember the slow, mindful morning ritual of preparing traditional Greek coffee. The process began by placing the small copper pot over the low flame of the gas stove. You had to watch it carefully, waiting for that perfect, precise moment when the rich, dark coffee began to rise and form a thick, bubbling cream on top. The roasted, earthy aroma that filled the kitchen was the universal signal that a new day had truly begun. But the magic did not stop with drinking it. Once the small white cup was emptied, grandmothers and aunts would carefully turn it upside down onto the saucer, letting the dark grounds slowly slide down the sides. After a few minutes of quiet waiting, they would turn it back over to read the future in the intricate patterns left behind. They spoke in hushed, dramatic whispers, pointing out shapes of birds that meant news was coming, or roads that signaled a journey. Whether you believed in it or not, this deeply ingrained cultural tradition was a beautiful excuse for women to sit together, share their deepest secrets, and offer each other comfort and hope for the days ahead. Let us turn our memories to the crisp autumn mornings and the sight of the classic blue school uniforms. If you went to school in the 1970s, you vividly remember slipping into that iconic blue pinafore with the stark white, perfectly ironed collar. Carrying your heavy leather satchel, you would walk to the schoolyard to join hundreds of other children dressed exactly like you. We would stand in perfectly straight lines, the morning air still chilly, listening to the principal and joining our voices for the morning prayer. There was a profound sense of equality in those blue uniforms. It did not matter if your family was wealthy or struggling. In the schoolyard, we were all the same. We shared our pencils, we shared our snacks during recess, and we shared the nervous anticipation before a difficult test. The strict but deeply caring teachers commanded absolute respect. and the loud ringing of the brass school bell was the most beautiful sound in the world when it signaled the end of the day. Those blue uniforms hold the ink stains, the chalk dust, and the pure innocence of our earliest friendships. Do you remember the chaotic, wonderful excitement of packing for the summer holidays in your grandparents' village? The family car would be stuffed to the absolute brim, with bags piled high and children squeezed into the back seat for the long, winding drive. Arriving at the old stone house felt like entering a completely different, magical world. The first thing that hit you was the overwhelming, deafening sound of the cicadas singing in the olive groves, a true symphony of the Greek summer. You would sleep in rooms with thick stone walls that kept the blazing heat away, sometimes resting under delicate white mosquito nets. Breakfast was fresh milk from the neighbour's goat, thick slices of crusty country bread, and homemade marmalade. You had the absolute freedom to roam the village paths from sunrise to sunset without a single worry. You knew every dog, every tree, and every neighbour, who would always stop you to press a piece of candy or a fresh fig into your little hands. Those endless summers in the village taught us the profound beauty of simplicity and grounded us in the deep, loving roots of our family history. Now let us remember the ultimate gesture of warm hospitality, the serving of the traditional spoon sweets. Whenever a guest crossed the threshold of your home, the beautiful ritual was immediate and deeply respectful. Your mother or grandmother would bring out a small, delicate crystal plate, resting proudly on a perfectly ironed, handmade lace doily. On it sat a tiny silver fork and a glistening, jewel-like portion of preserved fruit. Perhaps it was rich, dark, sour cherry, or vibrant, tangy, bitter orange. Beside it was always a tall glass of icy cold water. The magnificent contrast between the intense, sugary sweetness of the fruit and the crisp, refreshing water was simply absolute perfection. Preparing these sweets was an event in itself, requiring hours of quiet patience, boiling the fruit in large copper pots until the sugar syrup thickened just right. Offering this precious sweet was a tangible symbol that the guest was highly honored and welcome. The adults would sit in the living room, slowly savoring the treat, sharing stories and neighborhood news. It was a sweet, slow tradition that turned a simple visit into a deeply meaningful connection. Let our minds drift to the glowing yellow box on the street corner, the beloved neighborhood kiosk. At night, it stood there like a tiny, warm lighthouse in the dark. The kiosk was so much more than a place to buy things. It was the beating heart of local information and a treasure trove for children. Do you remember the incredible thrill of going there to buy the latest Donald Duck comic book, eagerly flipping through the colourful pages? Or buying that iconic, foil-wrapped chocolate bar, feeling incredibly rich with just a simple sweet in your hands? The magazines and newspapers hung from wooden pegs, fluttering gently in the wind. Fathers would send us there to buy a single cigarette or a box of matches, a common practice that today seems completely absurd. The kiosk owner sat inside his tiny, crowded kingdom, surrounded by 1,000 small items, knowing every single secret, rumour, and piece of news in the neighbourhood. He was the local oracle, the friendly face you saw every single day, anchoring the community together with his endless supply of daily necessities and warm conversation. Do you recall the distinct, clean smell of green olive oil soap that meant it was washing day in the neighbourhood? Long before washing machines became a quiet background hum, washing clothes and caring for the home's textiles was a massive collective event. The most vivid memory is the intense, rhythmic beating of the heavy woolen rugs, the flocati, on the open balconies. Women would hang these massive, shaggy white rugs over the railings and beat the dust out of them with wooden sticks, a sound that echoed loudly through the streets like a drumbeat. As they worked, the clotheslines would stretch across the verandas, flapping with clean white sheets catching the warm Mediterranean breeze. The beautiful part of this exhausting chore was the vibrant socialization. Women would lean over their balconies, resting their tired arms, shouting across the narrow streets to exchange recipes, share family news, or simply laugh together. It was a hard physical labor, but it was done in the warm company of neighbors, turning a difficult household chore into a lively, wonderful social gathering. Now let us remember the chaotic, colorful magic of the carnival season. When February arrived, the air filled with an intoxicating sense of joyful rebellion. We did not have expensive store-bought costumes back then. Instead, we relied on pure imagination, borrowing old clothes from our parents' closets, wearing oversized hats, and painting our faces with mother's bright red lipstick. Do you remember those fragile, thin plastic masks with the sharp edges and the thin rubber band that always snapped and tangled in your hair? They were uncomfortable, but we loved them dearly. The streets were instantly covered in a thick layer of colourful paper confetti and tangled paper streamers. The best part was the spontaneous evening parties in the small living rooms of our homes. The furniture was pushed against the walls, the record player was turned up loud, and everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest grandparent, danced without a single care in the world. It was a time of pure, unpretentious joy, where the whole neighbourhood let go of their daily worries and simply celebrated the beautiful gift of being alive together. Let us turn our memories to the quiet, sacred tradition of the afternoon siesta, a ritual that strictly dictated the rhythm of our long summer days. Between the hours of 3 and 5 in the afternoon, the entire country seemed to collectively hold its breath. The heavy wooden shutters were pulled tight against the blazing afternoon sun, leaving the rooms bathed in a cool, dark, striped twilight. Absolute silence was not just expected, it was the unquestionable law of the neighbourhood. The streets outside were completely deserted, save for the deafening, rhythmic song of the cicadas hiding in the trees. Inside the house, the only sound was the slow, steady ticking of the wall clock, measuring the lazy pace of our childhood. As a child, you were not always sleepy. You would lie quietly on the cool terrazzo floor, reading your comic books by the thin slivers of light sneaking through the shutters, turning the pages gently so as not to wake your exhausted parents. This forced pause gave us a quiet, beautiful space to daydream, teaching us patience and the immense value of peaceful silence. Do you remember the overwhelming sensory experience of the traditional village summer festivals? These magnificent celebrations usually happened in the main square, right under the massive ancient plane trees. Long, sturdy wooden tables were set up end to end, covered with simple paper tablecloths. The air was thick with the incredibly mouth-watering smell of slowly roasting lamb and fresh oregano. Then the music would start. The sharp, passionate wail of the clarinet, echoing through the mountains, is a sound that instantly brings tears of nostalgia to the eyes. The entire village, along with relatives who had travelled from the big cities, would join hands in a massive, slowly winding circle. You danced shoulder to shoulder with people you had known your entire life, feeling a deep, spiritual connection to your roots and your ancestors. We stayed up until the sun began to rise, children sleeping peacefully on 2 chairs pushed together, while the adults continued to sing and celebrate. It was the ultimate expression of our vibrant culture, a night where food, music, and community became one beautiful soul. Let us fondly remember the late summer ritual of preparing the winter provisions, specifically the making of traditional homemade pasta. Before the first autumn rains arrived, the women of the neighbourhood or village would gather for this massive cooperative effort. They would lay out massive, impeccably clean white cotton sheets right in the middle of the courtyard, basking under the hot sun. The air was filled with the sharp, slightly sour smell of the fermented milk and wheat mixture being used to make the tiny, crumbling pasta. Women sat together on low wooden stools, their hands moving with incredible speed and skill, crumbling the dough between their palms and spreading it out to dry completely in the sun. This was never a solitary task. It was a beautiful symphony of gossiping, singing old folk songs, and sharing deep advice. By working together, they ensured that every family would have a pantry full of warm, comforting soup for the cold winter months ahead. It was a profound lesson in community survival, teaching us that many hands working together out of love can easily sustain an entire neighbourhood. Now let us remember the sheer awe and wonder of gathering around the very first black and white television sets. In the 1970s, having a television was a rare and incredible luxury. Often, only one family in the entire apartment building or village had one. But in the true spirit of Greek hospitality, their living room instantly became a public cinema. Do you remember carrying your own wooden chair down the street to secure a good spot in your neighbour's house? The room would be packed tightly with wide-eyed children and curious adults. The host would frantically adjust the metal rabbit ear antennas, sometimes attaching pieces of silver foil, just to get a clear picture through the heavy static. We watched traditional shadow theatre, gripping football matches, or the first exciting Eurovision song contests. We shared bowls of roasted seeds and slices of fresh fruit, laughing loudly at the fuzzy screen. The television did not isolate us in our own bedrooms back then. Instead, it was a magnificent glowing hearth that brought the entire community physically closer together in one crowded, happy room. Let our minds drift to the cherished days of analog radio and the absolute patience required to make a cassette mixtape. Long before you could instantly stream any music you wanted, getting your hands on your favorite song was a true labor of love. You would sit cross-legged on the floor next to the heavy stereo system, staring intently at the radio dial, waiting for hours for the local station to finally play that one-hit song. The moment you heard the opening notes, your heart raced, and you slammed down the heavy mechanical play and record buttons simultaneously, accompanied by a loud, satisfying click. You prayed fiercely that the radio presenter would not talk over the beautiful guitar solo. If the cassette tape ever got tangled in the machine, you gently pulled the fragile brown ribbon out and used a wooden pencil to slowly, carefully wind it back into place. Making a mixtape for a friend or a teenage crush was the ultimate act of devotion because it represented hours of dedicated waiting and curating. We cherished that music so deeply because we actually had to work hard to capture it. Do you recall the loud, joyful chaos of the traditional Sunday family lunch table? This was the undisputed anchor of our entire week. The good white lace tablecloth would be spread out, and the fine plates, normally kept behind glass cabinets, were proudly brought to the table. The entire extended family was there, grandparents, aunts, uncles and cousins, tightly squeezed together. The sheer volume of the conversation was deafening. People were talking over each other, laughing from the bottom of their bellies, and arguing passionately about politics or football. In the center of the table was always a massive, beautiful Greek salad. And the most delicious part of the meal was not the roasted chicken or the baked pasta. It was the moment you took a thick crust of fresh, soft bread and dipped it deeply into the rich, tomato-infused olive oil left at the bottom of the salad bowl. We fought playfully over who would get the last dip. We may not have had a lot of money, but looking around that loud, crowded, food-filled table, we felt like the absolute wealthiest people on the entire planet. Now let us remember the slow, beautiful art of the handwritten letter. The physical arrival of the neighborhood postman was an event we deeply looked forward to. When he handed you a crisp paper envelope, your heart would skip a beat. You instantly recognized the familiar, looping, cursive handwriting of an aunt from a faraway village, or a dear friend who had moved away. Tearing open the envelope, you were immediately hit by the distinct, dry smell of the paper and ink. You held in your hands a piece of paper that someone you loved had touched, breathed on, and poured their emotions into. We read those letters slowly, savoring every single carefully chosen word. We proudly cut out the beautiful, colorful stamps from the corners of the envelopes and saved them in small tin boxes as precious treasures. We kept all these letters in old shoeboxes tucked safely under our beds, bringing them out on rainy days to read them again and again. It was a deeply personal, tangible connection to the people we loved, carrying a heavy emotional weight that a quick digital message today can simply never replace. Finally, let us return to that beautiful, intoxicating scent of the night jasmine and the innocent romance of the evening stroll. As the fierce heat of the day finally broke and the evening breeze rolled in, the entire town would empty out into the main square or the seaside promenade. This was the famous evening stroll. Girls would walk slowly, arm in arm, wearing their best summer dresses, giggling softly and sharing deep secrets. The boys would walk in the opposite direction, trying desperately to catch the eye of the girl they liked without being too obvious. The air was incredibly thick with the heavy, sweet perfume of the night-blooming jasmine that poured over the stone walls. There were no cell phones to distract us. If you wanted to see someone, you simply went to the square and looked for their face in the warm, golden glow of the streetlights. It was a time of pure, absolute innocence, where a single, shy smile exchanged under the stars was enough to keep your young heart beating fast for an entire week. That sweet smell of jasmine is the true, lingering perfume of our unforgettable youth. As we open our eyes and return to the present day, we realize a profound truth. We do not just miss the old objects, the blue uniforms, or the cassette tapes. What we truly miss is our youth, the slower rhythm of our days, and the deep, unbreakable connection we had with the people around us. We miss a time when our neighborhoods were our entire universe, and human presence was our greatest entertainment. If these memories brought a warm smile to your face and a small tear to your eye, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video to help keep our beautiful history alive. Now, I have a question for you. Which of these 20 memories touched your heart the most? Or do you have a different, special memory from growing up in Greece that we did not mention? Please, write your personal story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I cannot wait to share in your beautiful memories.